Close enough for a sword.
Sir, the Imperial Army of Japan demands your surrender. If you and your fellows lay down your arms, you will not be harmed.
I'll look for you on the field.
The Last Samurai depicts 19th century Japan, a time when the island nation opened its doors to the West, causing a titanic struggle between 1,000 years of tradition and the onrush of the modern world. At the heart of this struggle were Japan's elite warriors, the samurai. But how does Hollywood's version of history compare with history itself? We'll hear from the keepers of the historical record.
They could stand in the stirrups, lean out in front of the horse, over the head of the horse, and lay about like this, just cutting up their adversaries.
The film's director, Ed Zwick.
There was an edict issued in which samurai were asked to give up their swords, and it was the final indignity.
And from Hollywood's biggest, brightest star, Tom Cruise.
See a man, see your enemy, and deal with your enemy in front of you. And that is his destiny or your destiny, to live or to die.
Plus, is it or isn't it? Our surprise ending. Find out what's history and what's Hollywood. Next.
Rifles at the ready!
At the beginning of the film, I start out as a samurai warrior. I'm a ex-captain in the cavalry.
How many other genuine heroes you got lined up?
Yeah, the character was someone who had integrity at one point and became dishonored, and is suffering in a way that a soldier suffers from someone who has seen so much death, so much violence, and can't escape it. With Captain Algren, he's an explosion waiting to happen, and someone who's quite tortured about where he is, but he's not someone who wears that on his sleeve. It's very much under the surface. He's a laconic, tacit character. He's hired by Japanese, which at this time period in history, the Japanese went out and they spoke to the French, the Germans, the English, the Americans, trying and studied different educational systems, different political systems to try to unify their country.
Japan's got it in mind to hire experts to train their army.
We will pay you $400 a month.
5.
And so I was hired to go and train the Emperor's army on modern warfare.
Assume firing position!
It's what he does best. He is a soldier. You feel the concern that he has for these men, yet it's his responsibility to try to teach them how to stay alive and be efficient. He knows that by training them to be efficient, they're going to have a greater chance of survival. So there's always that internal conflict. It's not just, Algren isn't just going one way. He's very conflicted about life, about what he's doing, about warfare. But he's lost, and so hence the clash of Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy hit head-on in a battle.
The Last Samurai, starring Tom Cruise, explores a special breed of warriors who were respected, feared, and ultimately doomed to extinction. The samurai emerged as a powerful force in the Middle Ages, when Japan was ruled by hundreds of lords, each with his own corps of samurai.
There's this sense of service, this sense that you are what you do for your Lord. And then there's a sense of being prepared for death, that if you are in every moment ready to die, then you're really ready to live.
The samurai were elite warriors trained at special schools where they were transformed from boys as young as 7 into fighting machines. At their side, the curved and lethal swords considered the soul of a samurai. Other trademarks were a shaved head and the code of honor known as Bushido.
The rough Western equivalent to Bushido is chivalry. This idea that no matter what you're doing, if you do it with honor and with courage and with valor, you're a cut above, you're a knight, you're a samurai.
For more than 5 centuries, the samurai dominated Japan. They were indispensable to their lords, feared by everyday people.
For most of the Japanese population, the samurai were a government elite, and a lot of ways they were intimidating, and in a lot of ways Japanese looked at them the way people look at, you know, an unelected government. So there were parts about the samurai that weren't that glorious.
But however intimidating, the samurai couldn't hold back the tide of history. In the late 1800s, Japan was about to enter the modern world, a world in which ancient warriors were no longer needed. The Last Samurai focuses on this era, when one way of life was ending, another was taking its place, with the samurai caught in the middle.
To put the role of the samurai in context, it's important to learn more about the history of Japan.
The Last Samurai is set in an age that was nothing short of revolutionary. For centuries, Japan had been ruled by an emperor, considered not merely a man, but a god. Because the emperor was above day-to-day governing, the country was actually controlled by another man, the shogun.
European visitors to Japan in the 1500s and the 1600s, trying to explain to other Europeans what Japan was like, they referred to the Japanese emperor as the Pope of Japan, because they were trying to get this sense of someone who was sacred and revered but had almost no political power. And they referred to the Shogun of Japan as the Emperor of Japan.
The shogun was dictator of the people, commander-in-chief of the military. This system endured centuries when Japan was isolated from the rest of the world. But the beginning of the end for the shogun and the samurai came in 1853, when American ships under Commodore Matthew Perry steamed into Japan. Perry carried a letter from President Millard Fillmore asking Japan to open its harbors and to join the family of civilized nations. The Japanese realized their feudal system was holding them back. They needed to modernize. The last shogun resigned in 1867, and Japan began a tumultuous transformation. As for the samurai, their salaries were cut in half, and they were replaced by a modern army. The cruelest cut of all came when it was declared illegal to wear the famous sword. Thousands of samurai staged a rebellion and put up a gallant fight, following their code of honor to the end. But as the film The Last Samurai depicts, they were eventually crushed. And after hundreds of years, the samurai's privileged place in Japanese society was finally over.
Let's hear more from the star and producer of The Last Samurai, Tom Cruise, and its director, Ed Zwick.
I looked at 3 centuries of Japanese history, trying to glean anything I can about the culture, behavior, attitudes, and try to get it from all different kinds of different viewpoints. Because, you know, history is, you have first-hand data, that which you experience yourself, second-hand data, that which someone experiences and tells you about, and then third-hand data, which is, way out there. And a lot of history is when you read it, it's diverse, different opinions from the same experience. It was after Commodore Perry came in for the first time and he was turned away for trade. At that time, if you ventured on the shores of Japan, you were instantly beheaded on the spot. You were killed if you were a foreigner. You were not welcomed. And then in '53, recognizing the amount of wealth in the country and wanting trade with the country, Perry came in. He was turned away in '53 and came back in 1854 with a fleet and fired off the guns in their harbor in Edo, which at that time later became Tokyo.
It was this horrific shot across the bow, and the entire nation didn't know how to react because the samurai who had been empowered with defending, the shogunate, were incapable of responding to this technological terror.
That really changed Japan at that point. They, by the thousands, stood upon the shores looking at these gunboats, wondering what has come down from the heavens. And they realized we better change here. We better figure out what to do.
Within 10 or 15 years, the shogunate fell. Many of the samurai, the more enlightened samurai, realized that in fact their rule was obsolete, that what was needed was some strong national impulse and everything that came along with that, the creation of an imperial army, the consolidation of resources, the creation of railroads and any number of industrial growth. And it began at that moment, this notion that they could partake of what the West had to offer in technology, and yet, using what the West had to offer, eventually beat the West at its own game.
You know, you look at that small island and what they created for themselves and how they unified that country. It's the power and the culture. It's extraordinary culture. It is an ancient culture steeped in mythology, steeped in great wisdom also. You look at how today the resonance of that culture still is there.
The Last Samurai looks at two dying breeds, the samurai warriors and the shoguns who had ruled for centuries. In 1868, all power was transferred to a 15-year-old emperor who was declared the true and divine ruler. He took over a country that had no banks, no telegraph wires, not a single printing press. The emperor invited Dutch engineers, British sailors, and American educators to Japan, while sending his own officials to study in the U.S.
Clothing changed, food changed, all these aspects of daily life changed. It wasn't that there was just a change in government. What you smelled walking down the street changed. There was really a sense that a way of life, a world, disappeared in a matter of 15 years.
The goal: build a modern nation and turn Japan from a land of the samurai to an industrial and military power. In one sense, the restoration worked too well. Japan became a military colossus.
What happens in the 1860s and really the 1870s is the new Meiji government abolishes the samurai class, but they don't abolish the samurai code. The samurai themselves disappear, but some of the things they believe in become part of Japanese national mythology and the Japanese national spirit.
The once isolated nation came to dominate Asia, and it took a world war to stop Japanese expansion. After that war, General Douglas MacArthur banished all remnants of Japanese militarism. Citizens were ordered to give up their weapons, even the samurai swords that were heirlooms and symbols of Japanese strength.
We've talked about the weapons that the samurai had. We just learned some more about Japanese history. But in your estimation, is The Last Samurai more history or more Hollywood?
Well, it's a bit of both. I mean, the historical context is beautiful. I mean, you do a great job of recreating the Meiji state with all the pomp and the uniforms and the steady inflow of foreign advisors to push them into Western ways. At the same time, they do a great job of describing the samurai in their villages and the whole caste and pecking order in these villages. And it just is a wonderful picture of 19th century Japan, but I think it's in the substance of this film that you see real Hollywoodization. Because let's face it, the samurai in this 1876-77 were the bad guys. They were reactionaries, trying to go back to a bygone time when women didn't have rights, when there was no hope of democracy, when there was a real caste system in the Japanese villages where you had untouchable people who were discriminated against. And the Meiji government was trying to change that. In fact, a lot of these conscript soldiers who are coming down and shooting at the samurai in the film, these are actually the good guys, guys that are trying to inculcate a kind of democracy in Japan.
And what do you want?
To know my enemy.
I've seen what you do to your enemies.
Many of our customs seem strange to you, and the same is true of yours.
Well, Bushido, the way the samurai, the way the warrior is, encompasses all of life. A warrior is someone who certainly, through training, becomes more powerful than the average man. But yet they also recognize that with power, with any kind of power, and it's a metaphor for any kind of power, there is a great responsibility, which is something that I find incredibly compelling about compassion, about recognizing that you are more powerful and that you must take responsibility for everything you do, everything you say, every breath you take. There's some great values in Bushido, and I think that that is definitely embodied in this picture. And the reason I wanted to make a film like this, because it's an action-adventure movie, but it's about themes that greatly interest me and that that are very dear to me as a man. Loyalty, compassion, taking responsibility for everything that you say and everything that you do.
戦で死ぬのが怖いよ。
In the East, they recognized thousands of years ago that man wasn't a body. Man was a spiritual being. Recognized that. And that through training also to be able to have, put yourself in such a state where the mind is controlling the body. It was extensive, the kind of training I did, but it aided the character because even with the transformation that I was making, it's the same transformation, in terms of being able to move a certain way and that whole ability to have the mind move the body and not think about it. And suddenly, I'm moving faster and more precise than I ever thought possible. And no one got hurt, which is a miracle in itself, because even though they're not as sharp, those things will cut your finger off. It'll easily dig your eye out or cut your nose off at the speed they're traveling.
Great. That's it. Great.
Fabulous.
You see at this time period how the samurai was dying out, how they were being crushed out of history, actually, at that point during the Meiji time period, the elimination of the samurai.
The age of the warrior was ending and the age of the soldier was beginning. A soldier is essentially anonymous within his regiment, within his army. A warrior is individually possessed of this extraordinary autonomy and training.
The sword the samurai believed was his soul, or embodied the spirit of the one who carried it before. And for Katsumoto in our film, he feels that this is his ancestors. It embodies the soul, the spirit of his ancestors.
There's a wonderful samurai adage which says, the sword is in the man. The idea that a samurai sword is in some sense this embodiment of the discipline and yet the flexibility, the lethality and yet the aesthetic beauty. These swords would take, many of them would take over a year to make.
The sword is a real engineering feat. It is the lightest sword, it is the sharpest sword, it is the strongest, most flexible sword. It's something that they developed over 1,200 years ago.
What happened, of course, during this period in which our story takes place, is there was an edict issued in which samurai were asked to give up their swords, and it was the final indignity. Because for a samurai to give up his sword was essentially to give up that connection to his birthright, to 700 years of his ancestry.
The samurai would not dishonor themselves by using a weapon. They used the sword. And for them it was see a man, see your enemy, and deal with your enemy in front of you. And that is his destiny or your destiny, to live or to die. And that is what being a warrior is.
The fact that the samurai is not only the monolith of fighting and swordplay that it's been described to be, but that it has a great philosophical component, a wonderful artistic and aesthetic component, a poetic one, and a very spiritual one.
Ultimately, though, is the film history or Hollywood?
The Last Samurai is Historywood. I think Hollywood, when it partakes of history, has an obligation to get things right and not to bowdlerize it. But I'm not presuming to give a history lesson.
It is a celebration of that culture and the death and life of that culture. And a great, tremendous amount of hours, effort went into honoring that and spending time, with the sets, the wardrobe, the behavior, to minute details.
There's a wonderful expression, I think it's a Zuni proverb, that said, there are no truths, there are only stories. And I believe one way that we actually learn about life is in the telling of stories. I think many more people learn, you know, moral precepts or narrative truth, not through books and not in any academic way.
Now, this is an adventure picture, but it does take you into that world. It was a pivotal time in their history where it changed from the Eastern to the Western, where the kimonos then into the hats and the caps and the top knots were outlawed. All that stuff is very true and very true to that time. It's sweeping epic and very personal on the other hand. And yet when you see the film, it is what I have found and love about that culture.
Hollywood filmmakers use lights, cameras, and 21st century technology to transport filmgoers back in time. In this case, back to 19th century Japan. With that in mind, see The Last Samurai and judge for yourself whether it's history or Hollywood. And by the way, the next time you find yourself strolling in New York City, visit the Japanese garden here at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. It too is an experience that can transport you to another time at another place, just like a well-made Hollywood film. Taxi! For the History Channel, I'm Josh Binswanger. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stan.
Thanks a lot, man. My pleasure.
Do you remember the first time that I came to your house?
Absolutely. I remember we sat in the screening room, and I remember the sun was shining. You came in and you started talking. I'd read the script, and you just started talking about the film. And the next thing I know, you were almost dancing on the table.
No, wait a second. wait. No.
You were moving around.
Maybe I was kind of doing like a kendo thing.
No, man. You know, you were right there with the sword, jumping, and I was enthralled, and I got so excited about it. But just your enthusiasm and your intelligence and your insight into the characters and the time and what you wanted to do, I felt this is totally original.
So it's like almost you have to focus on action. Let's get his blend, so just go on camera left. Good. Now. Sorry.
I remember reading Bushido and the Code of the Samurai together.
Yeah, for the first time.
You know, when we talked about, I remember even our first meeting, we talked about honor, integrity, loyalty, compassion. These are things that I know you hold true to yourself, that are very important in my life and in our lives. And we were looking at today and what is the world like and the idealism of that code.
You know what I remember too? I remember as we first started to talk, I remember recognizing that we realized we both had sons and that somehow this movie was caught up with those things that we hope to somehow teach or communicate to our sons. I remember that moment as being a moment where we kind of went, oh, it was getting personal rather than only professional, and that was in fact a way into the movie and into the character later on in the film for you when you get to the village. I mean, that was something I saw very early, and I think that influenced me as we began to work on the script. When you were working on the script and the structure and shooting the scenes, you were talking, you know, we spoke of, you first meeting, you talked about the spirituality, the depth of character, honor, loyalty. Action! Remember the discussions, you know, we talked about how did you decide to shoot the action sequences in terms of how do you keep that elegance, that tone throughout the picture? I really pledged myself. My son is, at the time we started, my son was 16, and we had been watching movies together, and I'd shown him, I'd shown him The Great Escape or The Guns of Navarone, and I'd shown him Lawrence of Arabia, The Bridge on the River Kwai, I'd shown him Josie Wales. I somehow gotten into this thing of showing him some of my favorite adventure movies, but more than adventure movies, movies that had both ideas and action. And I kept thinking, well, why do these things have to be mutually exclusive? Why can't we go back to a kind of a movie that had both those things in it? And I just vowed to myself that I would honor the things that meant so much to me when I was that age. I wanted it to work, absolutely work, as this adventure movie. And romantic in the sense of, you know, the romance of Dumas, the Three Musketeers, the romance of somebody going to this foreign land and having this encounter with these strange, exotic people.
Rolling. Rolling.
Even if it isn't really looking at the cot, is that okay? But I think it shouldn't be as if that's his tatami space over there.
Now he starts to throw.
And then bring him up into that. And then Al comes. I remember thinking, at any moment, is this working as a story? Am I picked up and carried by the story? That it's finally about the narrative, and that all the other things that you and I talk about all the time, about Bushido, about spirituality, about the political culture at the time, about the characterization, that it all has to serve the story. And you were ruthless about that, literally. I remember, you know, when we talked about the training, and you said this can't just be another sequence in which the lead actor learns a craft and then uses it. It's not simply about training. How is it about story? How is it about his relationship with Katsumoto? How is it about his relationship with Taka? You know, how does this sequence, that is an action sequence, also serve this, you know, this great compelling narrative?
You were very specific in your direction when we got going. Well, always, you know, in exploring. You allowed the exploration, but you were very specific, and we didn't do many takes.
Let's see, hold on. And cut. There. Let me see it. Right. Get down.
Run it by Greg.
You know, see what I'm doing? I'm going slow, but I'm looking like it's hard to do. I'm putting energy into it while I'm looking. Okay? It's very good. Your fall was very good. Your first fall with leg fall was very good, and your second falls were very good. So it's just about the look there at the end. They take 2 steps, and then bang. They look around, and they do what they did yesterday until we say freeze. Go.
And action. Boom!
Those men who get hit in the back raise their hand. Okay. So, if they get hit in the back, at this moment, they should be turned away from us. Okay.
When people see this movie, and you know, I always like a movie that operates or affects people on many different levels, because you know, some people might want the action, and there's the great action adventure, and it's a very romantic film. And there is also a deeper, more penetrating message that I think embraces life fully. But the thing that I really enjoyed watching you do is, you know, we shot on 3 different continents. You look at the scope of this picture, how internal and beautiful the film is, how epic it is, but your ability to communicate as a director to people who don't speak English. Some of these actors did not speak English at all, and we were moving at a clip, and every performance is important and every moment is important, yet you had the ability to communicate very precisely in another language and get the performances that you want, and you also knew when you had the performance.
That's good, because the cameras are there trying to see over the hip. Okay? That's your mark, Yuki, okay? Action! Action! Go! Just hold your line until Tom offers the sword to the boy. Then start your line. When I step back. Yeah. I think you should just do it. I'll see it in his eyes. He'll go. That's okay. He'll start. Fine. That's good. Thank you. Okay.
You're detailed to that time period and the respect that you're paying to a culture which is enigmatic in many ways. And I remember you and I having that discussion. How are we going to get in? Because I've been to Japan many times. You've been to Japan, and how are we going to get in?
I think it's confusing enough in a movie sometimes when there's a big cast, when it's your own culture, to sort of say, well, who's he and who's she and what is their relationship? So the clarity of that casting, I think, became doubly important to not just invest in them the sort of philosophical roles that they took in the story, but also that for an audience, they would identify with them as completely as if they were somebody, you know, in a familiar setting, in their own family, in an adventure story that was familiar. That was the challenge, I think, was to find people that were so distinctive and so complete as actors, and then to work with them to even further sort of individuate. I certainly remember that. Taking the armor, when you take the sword, as you're taking it out and you look, I need a moment for you to see what's happening. So you're taking the armor, then you scream. But I need for you to see what's happening. Okay? Okay, good. Sosuke will run in there. Go. Action. He runs in there. He grabs the sword. Right? Right? Now he comes back. He's going to try to get Katsumoto. So your move is to block him, to stop him. Okay? Action. Right? Now guys, let's hold on there. Let's have Sosuke get to here, and you come to there. Okay? So one more time, Sosuke. And action. Great. Got the sword. And come. Boy, that's good.
Remember the first rehearsal that we had with them.
Right.
Because you see the videotape, you go dynamic, good.
Right.
But I remember the night before going, okay, remember you and I talked about, we really want to make it so safe for them and comfortable.
Right.
And what is their style going to be? How do you communicate? Because we were both being very particular. I remember the day about making sure that we were very, we studied up about the manners and what they expected. Were you as surprised as I was? And I think back, I shouldn't be, because suddenly there was that universal language of acting.
Yeah. I think movie culture, there may have been a disparity between what an actor was in Japan with the tradition of the no drama and the kabuki from many years ago. But I think film culture has become so universal in the way that Kurosawa influenced us over here, the same way our films have so traveled and become important there. I think that an actor in Japan has looked at the work of Marlon Brando as much as he's looked at the work of Toshiro Mifune. Yeah. And I think what people had always said to me, what I discovered initially, that there was something reserved about the culture in Japan. In fact, what I learned through the actors, and even from the very first week that you're talking about, is just how deeply emotional and emotionally available it all was.
They're amazing to watch, how elegant.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't see a lot of Western actors or any other actors with that kind of physical control. And even Ken Koyuki, her natural elegance.
It's true.
And
it's almost like dance training. It's very physical and very much like
aesthetic.
Yeah, that's right.
Strong and aesthetic, and you know, to be able to center and that kind of power where it doesn't look stiff, where there's a fluidity to that.
Do you remember how funny Ken was?
Yes.
You gave him a hat the first day you had those hats made, and the first thing he did was to sort of turn it around to look like yours, so that you were on a par with each other.
I know. That was wonderful, that humor.
That's right.
No, we have another shot on you. Yes.
It's on both of you. He said it's on both of us. He said it's finished. Did you feel competitive with yourself because you directed a great training sequence in Glory?
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, you know,
sleepless nights for you, or were you saying, "How am I going to do this? It's got to be better than the last time I did it."
I started to feel bad about it until I realized that John Ford made about 4 cavalry movies and stole from himself mercilessly in every one. So the fact that there may be some reference, there might be something that's a cousin to something else, or draw upon something, I realized, well, you know, go with what you know. But also the final battle. I wanted to do a battle that topped anything I'd done before. That you felt you'd gone as far as you could, and then it went farther.
As we went along, I started to realize, I mean, I knew beforehand what an ambitious picture this was.
Right.
But I remember standing on the battlefield with you.
Right.
And we were there. I remember looking over the thing, and I just looked at you. I said, "Did you have any idea that this was going to be ambitious?"
I think sometimes in a movie, if you act as if you know, and you have to sort of, you know, make those appropriate noises. But when you actually get there on the day and you say, "Oh my God, what was I thinking?" You know. But the truth is, I think if we had not done all the work we had done beforehand, we never would have been able to make the movie.
Can you get any more to your left or not? Higher. Can you see the lens? Good. Yeah. Okay. Good. Now everybody else can scoot in here too. And then can you come in a little bit here? Squeeze in. Come in. That's good. That's right. Now let me see what that looks like when Lee holds that thing up. Hold on, Lee. Lee. Now signal him, Lee. All right, now, you know what? We could maybe do this in the shot without a separate thing tonight, right? Perfect. That's great. Okay, let's shoot it. Go!
The world of emotion is the same in every language. And before there were movies like we make, there were silent movies. And things had to be communicated without words. And I think this movie, in fact, when it is most effective and when I'm happiest with it, is communicating without words.
It's an epic film, but a personal journey at this Civil War hero, fighter, captain, who has become disillusioned and really dishonored himself, and he doesn't know how to get out of it. Shoot me, damn it. So he goes to Japan to train their army in modern warfare, and he comes upon the samurai, who at the beginning is essentially an enemy that he is training the imperial army to destroy.
This is a man who is dishonored when it begins, who has in fact given himself away, who through this training, through this martial art, through this commitment to a philosophical code of honor, how he regains himself.
It's what happens when he comes into contact with him, what happens to him as a man, and his ability to confront and overcome his dishonor. It's a privilege to be able to make these films. It's a privilege to be able to do what I'm doing. I enjoy the conversations, I enjoy delving into the characters and the structure and the story.
Action!
Early on, I was prepping the character, and I found the internal workings of this character, where he ends up.
It is about his transformation, and it's about reclamation of soul, which is very true to the Bushido way of thinking.
Sorry. Gomen nasai. Gomen nasai for your husband, Hirotaro.
To know life in every breath, every cup of tea, every life we take, the way of the warrior.
Life in every breath.
That is Bushido.
Right.
It is a celebration of their culture and the samurai.
There was a quote that Tom found in a book of advice for samurai, how to live their lives. And this particular passage has stuck with me. It basically says that a samurai never needs to make a promise, because just to speak of something is the same as a promise.
It's a powerful code. I think it's universal. I think it's timeless. There's different parts of it: heroic courage, compassion, loyalty, duty and loyalty. But essentially it is about taking responsibility for what you do, for what you say. That once you have said something, you have to be responsible for that thing.
General Hasegawa asked me to help him end his life. A samurai cannot stand the shame of defeat.
They were the artists, the philosophers, the warriors of that time. And they had a responsibility in leadership, a responsibility to know, to work, to be compassionate, to help someone. They recognized with power comes a great responsibility, a greater responsibility. When you know something, or that something is wrong, you must be able to rise above the masses and fight for what is right.
There is great meaning, I think, behind this film, culturally, because it is, in a way, the roots of the Japanese. And Japan, no matter how modernized it has become, as people, we still have very much those feelings. There is still shame, and you know, it's inherent in our blood, I think, that so we're rediscovering, you know, what we have. And sometimes you have to go out in order to see, and sometimes we needed someone as brilliant as Edward and Marshall and Tom and to come and help us to rediscover what we really have.
When I started reading from the officers' point of view and how they felt about the Indians, the atrocities, it added a whole nother dimension to the man and to history. The fact that he had once been idealistic, but also the fact that he had connected on some spiritual level with these people. There was some connection there, that something that he saw, how they lived, what their life was like, that was so separated, but in some ways yet totally aligned with him as a man.
He changed his entire physique for the film. He allowed the character of Algren to lead him, and he followed, and he took on every challenge of this character.
I love working hard, and Nick Powell really took me up very slowly, step by step, built my body up to be able to do something like that, where there's, I guess, 38 moves, where I'm fighting 5 guys and the swords are whipping around and just missing my head, kicking a guy in the face and rolling and moving and cutting. Very demanding, but a hell of a lot of fun.
We've done saber work with him, and we've done all the samurai and all the basics. So he's done basic karate, basic jiu-jitsu. We've gone through a lot of training with him in all the different styles. So there is a character arc where we'll see him with one weapon transferring to another weapon and getting better throughout the film, which is really nice, because usually you come in and you find that the guy is at a level right the way through the film, so it's a nice development. In the Ronin sequence, it's the first time we really see him essentially as a samurai. So he's trained throughout the time he's been in the village. and he gets an ability which we see develop in the village sequences, and it's the first time we see him actually put it into use outside the village.
As the layers peeled off of my body and the greater control that I had, it actually changed the way that I moved in the armor, the way that I carried myself at that point. I could feel the ability of the mind over the body. I started to, as time went on, I recognized the ability to control the body, the ability to move the body in such a way, commanding the body to do that. I started feeling those different levels of awareness just within the fight sequence, because when we got to do the big battle sequence at the end, and I remember being with Ken, and we never got hurt.
Low rank?
When I met this cast, first of all, I was very impressed by their talent, very impressed by their depth, by their skill, their technical skill as actors, their physical skills, and their generosity. They felt a responsibility, and they were incredibly generous with me. Very, very helpful throughout the entire process.
We worked hard together. We had to trust each other completely because the timing had to be perfect.
After shooting, every day we had a rehearsal, 1 hour or 2 hours, but he never give up. And when I told him some pointers, you know, how to grip, how to use the body, he could do that in the first time. He's a quick learner. It was very wonderful collaboration. And finally, he became great samurai.
It's been great. He's an incredible person. And on the set, he's trying to help me, and he's very nice to me. He has so many ideas in his mind that I don't have. And he's trying to teach me those ideas he has through his experience. He told me that every scene, every take is a chance to do different things, and then trying to take advantage of each take.
It was just ecstatic to play a scene with him. Just looking at him and acting to him, and then his eyes and his look and everything. Then I feel like, okay, I'm living this character. And because of Tom.
The character's journey cannot help but affect the actor. Tom approaches each role differently. Each journey takes him to a different place. And the beautiful thing about Algren is where he finally emerges as a human being. And there's a lot of hope there.
It was incredible. I had so much fun playing Algren. He's a complex, he's just a wonderful character. And the stories and the characters that I get to work with and within the story is, it's beautiful.
Century Tokyo street in The Last Samurai required 3 months of construction and hundreds of artists and craftsmen. But this is just the most recent incarnation of the famous Warner Brothers backlot. Through the years, the New York street has been many places in many movies. From Prohibition-era Chicago in Robin and the Seven Hoods, to turn-of-the-century New York in The Great Race, to Chinatown in Lethal Weapon 4.
This is my third film with Ed, and basically what he wants from me is he wants me to have visualized the story and show him all the research and all the ground plans and all the models, and we talk and talk and talk. But there is a moment where I finally have to say, Ed, I'm going to do it now, and you'll see it, it'll be great.
Most of Japan no longer has this beautiful, natural, pristine quality, but it did. So how did we, in a different place, create it? We read book after book and looked at hundreds of pictures. This was a time in which the camera had found its day, and so everything was photographed.
It always starts with research, and we talked about what we actually needed, talked about the scenes we would need to shoot here, and then look at what the buildings were like and what would lend itself to what particular style of building. But most of these are actual just straight-on plant-ons, where we planted on the front of a Japanese-style building on the New York-style building.
We wanted to give it that sense of modernity mixed with antiquity.
The real difference is a difference of about a year. It's early 1876 and late 1876. In the early part of 1876, you would see rickshaws and carts. In 77, you see carriages and Western people on horseback and many more telegraph wires, because one telegraph line went to one telegraph machine, so that there are tons of wires all over the street. But I think the real change was in transportation and how the people actually looked.
That was the whole attempt in the street, was to say that the two cultures had come crashing together.
We built this particular set for a fight where Tom Cruise is being followed by some Ronin and has a very spectacular sword fight with them. We built it for the stunt, really, specifically wanting to make the stunt unfold down this hill and then get to the bottom where they could actually have the fight. What they've done here is they've laid down a sponge mat so that when they have their stunt here, it'll be falling on a rather forgiving surface. We had, I would say, between painters and carpenters, 150 people. And we started constructing this street, I think in the 1st of July, I'm not even sure now. And it took us about 3 months. And it worked out very, very well. But something I really like is the wall. When kids who grew up in 1876 talked about their childhood, they grew up beneath the wall. And that we are imagining, where you see that water tower up there, is where the actual palace, where the emperor lived, would be up there somewhere. And Jeff Oken, our visual effects guy, will put the palace in up there, so you won't know that it's not there. Look at how lovely these are, these bamboo gutters, and then the copper drain, and all these tile roofs are actually plastic. And what you see is happening now is that all of our set dressing is being packed up to be shipped to New Zealand for the medieval village, so it'll all get a second life. Very temporary, my work. It'll all be gone.
We flew in a helicopter around New Zealand for over 2 weeks, trying to find the place that most looked like the Japan of our imagination.
We started at the South Island, which everyone had told us was the most beautiful, and Charlie Harrington was our location scout and showed us pictures, and when I saw these pictures I said, that's what looks wonderful. And we came and looked here. You could see how the village would lay out immediately. It was one of those places where it just told you what to do.
I think the village is one of the hearts of the movie. It is a place that he comes to where he really gets to see that natural beauty and that sense of repose and peace that he needs in his life.
It's quite staggering for him to go from the cacophony of his past life into this place that is so placid and bucolic and ancient. And, that's certainly the point, that this place changes him.
It became a real village. There were dogs and chickens and goats and yak, whatever. There were bison living in it. I mean, it took on this life of its own. It was a real breathing place.
One of the things that's the most important about doing something in this period is to get the gardens right, and it really won't have life until the gardens are done right. And you can see that we have vegetable gardens and beans and various trees that we put in. This would be a samurai's house, and next to it is another farmer's house. We put in all of the terraces and all of the steps. Down here you can see we have a water wheel for grinding millet and a variety of things. One of the more difficult things is we had winter, fall, spring, and summer, and some days we had spring and fall and summer on the same day. So it's a bit of a scramble to get it all to look properly. So this is our main house. This is Taka's house, and it had a very special function that we had to be able to shoot inside the house during the bad, bright middle of the day. So we would come in and shoot inside for half a day and then go outside in the beautiful light. So it was very important that we built a house that would function very easily that way. Japanese architecture is very kind to you in that way because the walls are all removable and everything comes apart, and it's very modular. We're now in the Tatami Room, in one of our many tatami rooms. A tatami room was used for a variety of purposes. It could be a tea room, it could be a sleeping room, it could be an eating room. To this day, they still build houses like this. It's a very basic post and beam construction, and they were building them from the very beginning. This was the standard architectural style that never changed. One of the things I love also is the way the house frames the rest of the village and the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful valley. I'm most proud of the fact that when you sit here, you feel like you're in an ancient city. You gaze off and you feel transported.
The greatest testament to the village is that we brought over many extras from Japan, many older people who had grown up in villages like this. And as they walked onto that set and looked around, they began to weep because they felt that we had recaptured something that they barely remembered.
There is something about going to a period, 1876, it's not seen in that many movies. There's something about the whole feel, the physicality of the film, their hair and their clothing and all that, that just is so authentic and real. You know, and that's Nyla Dixon.
Nyla lives in a world of art and believes in character and the creation of the individual characters through their wardrobe.
This film covers a lot of historical ground. We have covered the American Civil War, Army, Japanese villager costumes, 2 of the Imperial Armies of Japan, Tokyo streets pre the European influence and post the European influence. And in New Zealand, we built the samurai armor. Tom as an actor is a very physical actor, and so what was really important was that we made Tom as comfortable as possible, but it is a period film. So I had to allow for the comfort factor, but make sure I did get Tom into period clothing. And Tom just slid into that Civil War uniform. And the kimono he wears is extraordinary looking.
As his character goes through the transformation, you can see the clothes start to change, how he wears his clothes, how he carries himself.
When it came to the costume that we've all come to love, which is a particular brown leather coat, it was one of those things that from the moment Tom put it on, you couldn't imagine him without it.
The coat that Tom wears, that long coat, is a wonderful sort of take on a traditional duster, but it looks like someone who's really worn it to death and slept in it and really feels of character.
Algren to me is a person who should feel very isolated. I want him to feel like a person who doesn't fit anywhere. And quite deliberately, I sometimes remove parts of his army insignia, or he doesn't do it quite properly. It's like he has gone back into the army uniform, but under protest.
Well done, Bob.
There's a very particular scene between the character of Katsumoto and the Emperor. And in that scene, Sengoku Sensei made the Emperor's costume and guided us through how the scene should take place. And as part of that scene, we have a group of ladies in waiting who stand behind the Emperor, including a little child. And we had replica costumes for this, which are incredibly beautiful. So in that scene, it is a perfect replication of exactly what the Emperor and his household would wear.
海の向こうを知る者の助けがいる。
この勝本がいらざる時は死を賜りますよ。
The use of the different colors of the kimono and the different fabrics to be appropriate to the period. We discovered that the period of this time were very somber in tone.
It's going to be a bit of a shock for people who are used to the Japanese style being quite bright. In fact, during this particular period in time, the Meiji period, it was quite restrained, quite low-key, quite beautiful colours. Well, what we're seeing here, and this is one of the most fascinating things about this film, is this extraordinary moment when Japan began to become westernised. And this street scene is all about that. And in this moment, Algren, the character, is coming back to Tokyo after having visited it earlier, and he's seeing a lot more Western people here. He's seeing a lot more Western influence in the costumes. When we did the Tokyo streets, this again is one of these extraordinary scenes in this movie that shows not only collisions of culture, Japanese and Western, but it also shows what was happening in Japan at the time and the effect of that cultural collision. So you have these extraordinary images of Japanese men wearing bowler hats, and this is the reality of the 1870s in Japan. With the samurai armour, the very first thing we did was we went, of course, to Japan, and we went to the samurai armour houses, and we also went to a lot of the museums, and we looked at everything we could possibly look at, and we read every book.
The start of the process is designing up all the costumes, and illustrators have gone through and done most of that. Then the next stage is going through, breaking the whole costume down into componentry and getting each piece and basically making an original for each piece, moulding it, spraying it, painting it. So each costume's got, you know, about 300 pieces on it.
We're just going through the fittings to get everybody ready for set. So it's a mad rush to get them into wardrobe and then send them down to set.
You put on an under kimono, you put an over kimono on, there's an armoured skirt that goes on, a central chest piece which is called a do, armour for sleeve that comes right up, which is chain mailed, and then over the top of that goes another arm guard. There's a neck piece to protect the neck from being slashed, and then of course there's the helmet. There are a lot of demands on what you're going to do with that samurai costume, to do with stunts, to do with leads, all the sort of ramifications that make up a high-action film. This is based on a particular series of events that happened in Japan in this time, but it is a fictional story. So you try and represent history as well as you possibly can.
When we were looking at the battle sequences, I remember sitting in there going, okay, we're going to need how many men for this battle sequence?
There aren't many Japanese in New Zealand where we were shooting these scenes. Who are they going to be? How are we going to find them? How are we going to train them? So many of these guys were martial artists who were so proud of their skills and wanted to show those skills to the world in a big international movie.
We have all the battle extras for the film arriving over the last couple of weeks, and we basically set up a training program for them with drill training, artillery training, sword archery training, basically all the training that they'll need to do for the picture. We've got 426 here today. We're just training them, just trying to get them ready for shooting.
A lot of these boys never left Japan before in their life, so this is their first overseas experience. They're bonding with their other platoon members, and it's becoming a tight unit. And we've constructed a buddy system where they pair up and they'll help each other dress in the morning with their samurai costumes or military uniforms, and they're becoming one. So, you know, they'll die for each other. That's what we want.
Battalion! What?
They get here at 8 o'clock, have breakfast. 8:30 start forming up, and they're on my parade deck at 9 in the morning.
Right! Face! 1, 2!
They're learning from marching to the way to carry their weapons. They're learning how to fix bayonets and unfix bayonets. They're learning how to move into a skirmish. They're learning how to route step on a dirt road and to form into combat formations from a regiment or platoon formation.
We're just running them through a final basics so that they learn as soon as you get action, they load, and when they get cut, they check the weapon, unload, check the weapon. Give me pen. Count. Any violation of safety or mistake, as this is a boot camp type training camp, they do 10 push-ups. And it's not to punish them, it's just to help them remember. They have all the notes, all the parts of the weapon, all covered in it, the firearm safety. We just go right through, follow that with them, and they just learn it all that way. And then they learn the English commands, so on the set they can just follow it. 2 weeks training. Basically, you just keep persevering and go with them, but they're picking it up very well.
I'm just beginning to be an actor, and I found about this extra, and this is American production. And I would like to know about the production, how they make it. So I came over here all the way from Japan. Well, right now we are doing the soldier and the samurai sides. How we are practicing right now is about battle, how we do all the battle steps.
Hut! Make sure with this one, go slow, yukuri onegaishimasu. But from here, aim right where he was. Make him duck for real. Then take the cut. I'm seeing this. Okay? I know you're trying to be safe with your partner. Just slow down and go straight across. Can you explain that for me?
From the beginning, they didn't even understand any English words. Now they can march with their English commands and Japanese commands around a parade ground, move into combat formations, and understand how to use the manual of arms with their weapon.
休めの姿勢で他の所帯を待ちましょう。
We teach them how to march as the new Imperial Army first. So when we want to march as the old Imperial Army, it's easy to be bad. Not only the uniforms will look different, but the way they hold the weapons is different, the way they march will look different. So the audience will actually see a big transformation between the old and the new armies.
When you see a fight scene in a battle, your eye inevitably goes to the one pair of guys who are down there in the lower corner of the frame who are kind of going like this and laughing. And there are movies that I love that have that in it, and it just kills me to see it. And I was determined not to have that in this movie. I was determined that these extras would learn these choreographies and that they would attack them with real intensity so that the frame would be full of that.
It was so extraordinarily impressive to watch him not only manage all of the technical elements that a director has to manage in a film this size, but also to take the time to really understand what drives the film.
Go there. Come on, guys, come with me.
Moment away.
You all did a great job today. Absolutely outstanding. I have never in my entire career seen anything like this. If you see it on film, you're going to be very proud of yourselves because it is very, very exciting. So domo arigato. Have a great weekend. All right, thank you.
We have about 740 weapons. That's just real firearms. On top of that, we have rubber and replica firearms.
You have real spears, you have fake spears, you got wood spears, you got steel spears, you have rubber spears. It is an army in the truest sense, and there are different divisions in the army. Each one of those divisions uses different weaponry.
We have 7,000 arrows, 300 or 400 sets of swords. We'll probably be going 24 hours a day where we'll shoot for 12, 14 hours, and then we'll have a crew to come in and repair. It was very important to give them authentic, sort of quality stuff.
We have some that are actual period weapons that we've refinished and built up to look 100%. Basically what we've done is we've refinished the barrels, polished the receivers, polished up the brass, basically got them as clean as we could, found Mausers with the best looking stocks and proper cartouches, and we use these for our tightest shots. We've gone so far as removing the manufacturer's markings on them, putting them elsewhere on the weapon so that when they decide to shoot a camera angle looking down the top of the weapon, they don't have current manufacturers. These are 12-pound field howitzers. They're solid bronze. They were manufactured by Gilmore Ordnance.
We built these cannons from scratch. We built a foundry to cast a cannon, special. It's about 1,800 pounds of bronze it takes to make a cannon. The finished process, we've got about a 940-pound barrel. We had to train the troops to fire the cannon, and that's why they brought us over here for the safety factor. Teach them how to fire, because these are fully operational cannons, exactly like they would have had in that time period, 1876.
I think that what allows the characters to live and breathe on screen is the authenticity of the world that surrounds them.
Ram charge! Charge is seated. Now, as soon as number 1 and 2 are clear, I'll be the gunner. Fire!
The biggest challenge on a movie like this is safety. I mean, bar none. You're looking at 300 people from Japan. You're teaching them how to become military and how to fire firearms and how to safely fire firearms on a set where there's going to be conflict and people fighting in close.
What I may be proudest of is the fact that no one got hurt. These were remarkable animals and so well trained.
We had a lot of discussions on how we would deal with the animals, and SPCA was involved on a regular basis. They were on the set every single day.
These are replica Gatling guns. We just took solid steel, turned them down into barrels, bored them out to look like they're live, and designed a little plate on the back. It's actually cast off an original plate off an original Gatling gun. This is historically correct. I'll tell you, the significance on the Gatling gun, which will be apparent in the film, is that is a wall of rounds coming at you. Ed Zwick describes this as he says he wants the samurai to come charging forward and run into a wall of bullets, and he wants them to stop dead.
Each samurai has 2 swords, you know, a bow, a quiver with, 6 to 8 arrows in it.
We have ninja swords, we have long katanas and short wakazachis and retractables. And all this whole set of bayonets and everything was all made at Ueda. These were all made from rubber molds so that they could pour the sword handles and imitate the blades. The first training was done with wooden swords with the stunt department, so we tried to give them the heaviest wood, so they were training with those.
When you hear about and talk to these guys about how many months it takes to build these swords, it's just incredible.
Everything that we have one of each. We have rubber stars, we have real aluminum stars, which are great for affixing to special effects makeup. Many of the arrows that we had made are made of bamboo, and just the way they used to make them. Pete Clark went to Kyoto and met with a bow maker who made 10 prototype bows for us, and then we made bows from those. So they are absolutely the same way samurais made bows 400 years ago.
I met one of the bows archery masters in Japan, and he taught me how to shoot, how to concentrate.
There's a moment in the film when Tom's character realizes that there's a rebellion of these samurai that refuses to use firearms. He's utterly shocked and amazed that that was part of the modern world that they were rejecting. And they stopped using them, knowing that they would be killed.
So I would keep that for sure.
Okay, well, this is day 1 of shooting the film. It's more than a little terrifying to actually go back. There's something that happens when a director looks at a film, even in its final form, where it takes him years to actually get over what had happened on the day, and now I'm actually being forced to remember it. But this is in a place called Engyoji. It's a 900-year-old monastery that we had to reach by taking a funicular. It's above a small town called Himeji in Japan, and we all felt that it was somehow the most fitting and respectful place to begin shooting the film, because it has the heart of old Japan in every space, in every piece of wood, grooved into the paths that you see Tom and the character playing Bob walking.
Chapter. Right there. He stands right there. Perfect.
We're inside the temple now, and it's this extraordinary space where the light coming from outside reflects on the wood itself, and John is using the natural light to actually light the scene. He's cutting it with a particular way from outside that you can't see from the shot. But it's a very, very beautiful space, and we felt that we needed that space to sort of infuse the film. We wanted to have something real to begin before we began actually to use artifice and building to imitate something. It was as if all of us, having been in the real space, could then understand the feeling of it and try to recreate that. Once he's landed, you're inside, and then I come to this place of my ancestors, and it's almost as if we're feeling the place around us. It's not a move.
You want to see the world.
See him see it. As he's looking, feel the world starting to spin around him a little bit. Okay? This is actually one of the rare moments in the film in which I allow the camera to become more subjective. The camera is essentially invisible, and I tried to have the camera be actually as humble as it could, to be away from the story and let the story tell itself. But this moment I felt, as Ken actually talks about something in the past in this beautiful place, I felt that the camera could almost be inside his head and doing it in the moment that he talks about the cherry blossoms. Parenthetically, those cherry blossoms were not real because, of course, we weren't shooting in the spring, so we experimented. I had to imagine weeks and weeks and weeks as to come up with different fabrics, different materials. There were the cherry blossoms that needed to blow. There were the cherry blossoms that needed to be seen close up. There were the cherry blossoms we had to mass produce. But the space that we're in is a real graveyard, and you can see the shrines actually all around it, and it's a very, very strong and powerful place. I was thinking, John, to try to get, didn't they get that tree maybe? We shot all around this monastery. We had already designed the opportunity to include it in many different parts of the story because we could only be there for a few days, and indeed it would appear several times throughout the film. So it's as if we would take little pieces of the real place that we would then cut into the place that we would build, and we would sort of kludge them together so as to make it invisible. Every time that I see myself talking to Tom, I'm reminded of his suppleness in moments like this, that we would prepare and prepare and prepare, we'd rehearse, and then we'd get there on the day and it would all be different. And what was extraordinary to me was his willingness to just sort of sit and let it sink in and then just flow with it. He was remarkably supple in that way. Leave these guys where they are, okay? The two guys who are on the outside. We've now moved to Kyoto. We're in the second week of filming. We're in an extraordinary temple called Chionin, and we felt that there were some spaces that we could never even begin to reproduce, and this is one of them. We were trying to recreate the feeling of the Imperial Palace, and I'm sure you'll see in a moment the steps that they're walking up. They were majestic, and we wanted to just have that sense of something portentous about to come as they approach the Imperial Palace. And there were so many places like this in Kyoto itself. Kyoto is the real center of not just of learning tradition in Japan, but it was the one place that wasn't firebombed. Cordell Hull and Sumner Wells in the Roosevelt administration had been Japan hands and had taken a great love of Kyoto in their youth, and they implored Roosevelt in the bombing of Japan to spare Kyoto, and they did. Two women just go to the side a little bit that way. The two in the back? Yes. We're now in another temple in Kyoto, trying to create a space as part of the Emperor's Palace. The man talking with me is a man named Ed Licht. He's part of the Directors Guild, but he also spent many years in Japan and is a self-proclaimed Kyogen expert as well. Some of the women who are wearing those gorgeous robes, one of them on the right, her name is Yoko Narahashi, and she was a woman who I first met when I began casting the film. She runs a theater company in Japan. She was trained, she's not just bilingual, she's really bicultural, and I think she'd spent a couple of years actually at Strasbourg. And really she became a kind of Beatrice for me for the film. She made it safe for the acting community to begin to trust me, and not only translated for me as the film went on, but translated my deepest intentions. She was hugely important to the film. Parenthetically, these costumes that they're wearing were costumes that had originally been based on the original costumes that the Emperor's family had worn in this moment, because a man named Sengoku-san took Nyla Dixon and I into his workshop and showed us the real fabrics and the real designs for what they would have worn in those days. The man playing the Emperor is a son of a very famous kabuki actor. His name is Chichinosuke Nakamura, and his father runs one of the biggest kabuki theaters in Tokyo. He himself is a very talented kabuki actor. What Ken Watanabe does here, as he kneels before the Emperor, becomes very important later in the film, and it was a bit of behavior that Ken understood and actually had shown me. I then took advantage of it much later in the film when the character of Algren then speaks to the Emperor on Katsumoto's behalf. It's as if he's imitating the same gesture.
If you would, you might bow and then pass them and let them go by. If the rickshaw has to stop for a moment because someone else is blocking it.
We're into about the third or fourth week of filming. We've come back to the United States now. We're in the Burbank studios, which one could say is as foreign a country perhaps as Himeji, Japan. But we are on a street that has served as so many other streets in movies gone by, and suddenly for us it's become Tokyo in 1876. It's a really remarkable set that Lily Kilvert has designed based on photographs of the period, this having been the moment that the camera was first introduced to Japan. People went camera crazy, as they remain to this day. So we had photographs as the basis of the research for everything that we were doing, the signage, the telegraph wires, the costumes, all of it. Suddenly we've jumped now to the fourth week of filming, or fifth. We're in shooting a week of nights. This too is built in Burbank. This lagoon where Katsumoto's Tokyo house is set, on which we've created this really lovely Japanese traditional home. It's a crucial moment. It was a difficult thing to shoot. It was the first action sequence of a film, and whenever you're shooting action and you haven't actually done it in a while, it's as if you're learning to do it all over again. And we discovered as we were filming that there were suddenly noise restrictions because of the neighborhood in Burbank, and we had to change our whole shooting pattern. It was very trying because you never really know what the action's going to look like and what your technique's going to be. We're back on the street now, shooting a very crucial moment. This is the moment when they cut off Nobutada's top knot. You see Yoko Narahashi behind me. You see these really extraordinary actors. It was very important for us to find Japanese actors in America whose accent was traditional and not Nisei, and meaning second generation Japanese here, because we wanted the film to sound authentic to the Japanese audience as well.
Tim, and then he comes and looks and sees what's going on.
We're back here on the Burbank Street. I'm looking at the signage up there. Every one of those signs is based on, a real sign of the period. The man kneeling beneath the camera is David James, who was the unit photographer who did an extraordinary book of photographs during the filming. And that's Tim Spall, who became quite a resource to me in some of the period behaviors of the time. He's one of these very accomplished English actors who knows so much about the actual, period, what is appropriate to period. I also thought that the character that Tim plays is really based on a very famous photographer of the day who recorded many of these sights and sounds and places that I then used for the film. So his character is constantly taking pictures of geisha, of street scenes, and then ultimately the samurai themselves. Each of these little vignettes begins with a conversation between John Toll and me, and there must have been, maybe 50,000 of these conversations before, during, and at night watching the dailies. And it was a very, very dynamic relationship because he's an opinionated man. He's a very determined, even ferocious artist, And it was a very interesting process where we each had to almost rhetorically convince each other of our points of view and test what we believed for each shot. And, I think what John's work ends up, movie just, speaks for itself. But the relationship of determining the shots was really at the heart of the process. I've put a camera in a truck, and in a crane, on a roller coaster, and on any number of places. I'd never really put one in a rickshaw before. And the Steadicam in this shot is actually in another rickshaw at a certain moment. And I just thought that was one of those great incongruities of making an old-fashioned period movie where you'd see extras in period clothing suddenly talking on the cell phone to their agent, and a Steadicam riding in a rickshaw. This is on a four-wheeled vehicle here, in which it's, I don't even know what the vehicle would have to be called. It's like a little motorized Chapman dolly or something. I'm sure that John and the Grip actually devised it just for the shot itself. Well, this is the fight that we shot over 3 nights with Tom. It's the first thing we really talked about in terms of stunts for the movie and became the focus of his training. He ultimately had to do 36 moves consecutively, almost as if it were a kind of small dance performance, and each one had to be exact because there were people swinging aluminum swords at him and he was swinging one at them. We were very determined not to have the old traditional kind of choreography where someone's waiting to be killed. We wanted all of them going full speed all the time. And it was just remarkable work, and he's proud of it. And we're happy about it. Well, suddenly we've jumped to New Zealand now, and it's after the new year. We're in the village. That's Nick Powell, to whom I'm speaking. Nick is the stunt coordinator who has choreographed all these fights with me and with the actors. The man with him, that's Hiroyuki Sanada, who plays Ujio, who is unto himself one of the great martial artists in Japan, and was to Nick and to me this remarkable resource, because he not only had such a brilliant control, but he has such experience in the genre and has done so much and had so much to help us with. And I felt sometimes that not only was I directing him, but I was also a student to him in this movie. We're talking here about something that becomes very important. Obviously, the sign of respect is central to the culture, but also becomes central to the narrative of the story, because it ends with the Imperial Army showing their respect and then Algren going to the Emperor. And so trying to understand the nuances of who bows to who and when, and what is appropriate, and how does each various little shading reveal all sorts of nuance was very important for me to try to get right, and to enlist those who knew it much better than I. And the idea of kata and repetition, which is what they're doing here now, is of course central to any kind of martial art. And the idea that Algren would find his way, recovering from his wounds, and finding his way toward the spiritual through the physical, is at the heart of the second act of the movie, in these repetitions, in these kata. The stillness that he gets to is a legacy of his understanding the training. We're here now, preparing to shoot the scene in the rain where Ujio beats up Algren. It begins with these 2 lovely little boys. The boy playing Higan played the character of Simba in The Lion King, which is where I first saw him in the Tokyo production. And it's a very difficult thing, because that mud became a kind of gumbo. And here, not just these boys, but then later Tom and Sanada were swinging these kendo sticks at each other's heads at great strength and speed. And there was real risk. But we sort of thought that the rain would give this lovely quality to the whole ambience of the scene, give it a kind of imminent feel. We're now into the second action sequence of the film. That was the attack by the assassins, by the ninja. And this is a sequence that I believe we devoted an entire week to, if not more. And each of these bits had to be choreographed for weeks before. And then the challenge of actually how to photograph this and how to break it down, in my mind, to give it some coherence and some narrative understanding so that it's not just chaotic, was a significant challenge, particularly as you go into nights and you're working all night long and trying to keep your focus at the same time that you're trying to, keep your health and keep your strength. But I knew that each fight in the movie had to be different from every other fight. They each had to be of a different nature and even of a different almost, nomenclature. I think that the idea of this attack and the defense of the village is much different in sense than the final battle is entirely different than Algren taking on the Ronin. I think it all had finally to do again with narrative, the investment in the characters as much as the actual stunts themselves. And the ability to actually follow what was happening with clarity was certainly the thing that one looks to someone like Kurosawa to learn from, because that was his extraordinary gift. We're now inside during part of that same stunt because he did his own stunts. There's nobody standing in for him. This is another moment in the same sequence when the young boy pulls his father's sword to take on the ninja, and here you've got actually, 12-year-old boy doing his own stunts as well. So he had to train just like everybody else. This is the kind of sequence that has to be broken up into 1,000 pieces, and when you're doing it, you fear that there's going to be no continuity and no flow, and somehow you have to keep in your mind the feel of the whole, which is often why you have worked together on the choreography and understand you're picking up something in the middle and trying to, understand what's happening in 3 different places at once. You can hear on the track here the cicadas. They were so loud we had to loop every single thing we did in this set. It's the parade ground. Fortunately, there were not that much dialogue, but it was enormously difficult to have this number of extras in this place. It's actually a cricket pitch that we turned into the parade ground in Tokyo. And we were actually in the town of New Plymouth here. This is a man named Togo Igawa, who is a very talented Japanese actor who also has worked in London with the National Theatre, and he's playing Hasegawa. And there's the parade ground with no one in it. When you see the actual film itself, you'll see thousands there. We did this as a comp shot where we shot on a different day, all the extras out there, and then we kludged those 2 elements together. Here we are now on the parade ground itself, later when Algren is training the troops. Each set of uniforms were different, the old Imperial Army and the new Imperial Army. It obliged us to literally have to give 2 separate looks to these extras. It was a remarkable accomplishment on Nyla's part to be able to, keep them straight, and the ADs as well, to be able to dress a certain number and change them even in the middle of a day for different sequences, because they took place in different times of the movie, yet we only had a certain number of days on this set to do it, so we'd have to actually go back and forth in time.
After you have fired this group.
That's Yoko translating for me. The issue of translation is so interesting because it puts this lag into the set of conversations, which you think is an obstacle and an annoyance, but there's also some godsend in it. It actually allows you sometimes to compose yourself and say less than you might not ordinarily say as the translation's taking place around you. The actual manual of arms and training was accomplished for us by a technical advisor, a man named Jim Deaver, and his associate Dan King, who really went to school so as to get all of the tactics and all of the commands correct in Japanese. Dan is fluent as well, and they took it upon themselves to train these 400 or 500 men. And now we've jumped toward the end of the shooting. We're in the final battlefield. We're in this hidden trench as they await the final attack. It was terribly difficult to control this blinding sun and yet try to give it a feel of balance and imminence for the whole battle, because we're shooting this scene over 31 shooting days with every vagary and variety of weather you could possibly imagine. And we didn't want the snappy blue, so often we would stage something and then literally wait for the light to be correct for a cloud and then race to get the film in cloud to have it give it some kind of shape, some kind of feel rather than direct sun. I love the moments when you see this huge group of people sitting around as if they're picnicking as other people are in the middle of this deep and intense performance. It always it's a very difficult thing when later you see any film not to think about where the craft service table is. It's a hard thing to talk to a group of people through a PA system or a megaphone and not feel like D.W. Griffith. And what was remarkable was how these guys had come, how they had devoted themselves to take 3 or 4 or 5 or even 6 weeks out of their lives in order to give themselves to this film. Some of them were students, some were martial artists, some were just guys who thought it'd be a lark. And what they did was so extraordinary with their commitment to being there in the sun, wearing this horrible armor, doing it, day after day, and taking themselves at risk. And look at this, here they go, and how could one even talk about what they're trying to accomplish here? It's not the kind of shot that one ever wants to do too many times, because the possibility of error, of risk, of people hurting themselves is enormous. But we were insistent that this happen not with CG, but with real people. We felt there was something ineffable that we needed to have that otherwise would be lost. And once you add horses into the mix among men, you clearly are in a even more precarious situation. The horses were so remarkable in terms of their training, though, and their ability, their willingness to work around gunfire and smoke, explosions. You can see now, suddenly we're on the same battlefield, and you've got people wearing scarves and mufflers, it's cold, and we're supposed to shoot the same sequence as if it's absolutely in continuity. That's Jim Deaver, to whom I'm speaking, all dressed up so he could be out there with the men as if he's a Prussian officer who advised the Imperial Army. And here they are just getting into position now. Ironically, these kind of scenes are created as much in the setup as they are in the actual execution, to try to understand the geography and create the tension that sort of allows the audience to invest in the movie, invest in the scene itself. Most of this sequence had to be shot one side and then the other. One day people would be dressed as samurai, the next day they'd be dressed as Imperial Army soldiers. And so we had to keep in mind, having to have both sides of every single moment, and yet we couldn't film them both at the same time. You'll see, I'm directing 1,000 people and yet one person at a time, trying to talk about how, an arrow hit might be taken, how to stage something for multiple cameras where there's an interesting bit of action in the foreground of every shot. I could allow the background action to fall off a bit, but I often had to devise all sorts of systems about giving people numbers so they wouldn't all fall at the same time, so they wouldn't all die at the same rate, so they wouldn't all suddenly be on the ground, no one left standing. To try to give that feeling of randomness, we had to create these sort of arbitrary and often ingenious systems to actually suggest the chaos. So indeed, it wasn't a uniformity of behavior, but it actually felt like something might really be happening. And each bit is accomplished only 3 or 4 seconds at a time. We went out to the battlefield every Saturday and every Sunday for the 12 weeks we were shooting before we got to it. The preparation, first with 6 people, then with 12, then with 20, shot for shot, was the most grueling and arduous we'd ever done. We felt we had to maximize every moment out there and try to understand how we could actually logistically plan to accomplish something like this. Most battles that I'd seen before are just a group lining up and charging. It doesn't involve strategy, it doesn't involve narrative, and we wanted this to be a complete scene with a beginning, a middle, and an end, where you knew where the principles were, when you knew what the strategy was, and you actually participated in it. But that obliged it to be much more detailed and took a lot more time to do. This is a lovely Japanese actor. His name is Koji Fuji. He's really a Yabusame horseman, which says he can ride and shoot at the same time, and he's a very good actor himself, who was playing one of the cadre of the samurai ensemble, and he has the most beautiful face when he does what he does. I love look at the man standing behind with a flaming arrow there, and yet all you're looking at is his face. His poise is very beautiful here.
And don't forget to look up where the arrows might be coming from.
Now, what you're going to see here are people already with arrows stuck in them or acting as if they were being shot. This is in anticipation of the various CG arrows that we're going to paint in or paint out. If an arrow is already on someone, we're going to actually paint it out before it hits them. If it's not in them, we're going to paint it in. And again, we had to try to accomplish the feeling of randomness. Many of these guys aren't stuntmen, and so they had to be, helped to do too little, or in the case of not doing enough, they had to do more than they were doing. And, I think a scene like this is actually no better than the worst person in it. It's remarkable how your eye goes right to the person who's not doing something well, And often in the editing, that's what you're editing about. You're literally taking out those moments where people ruin something that otherwise would have been great. It's not their fault that, they're not professional, but, you have to be mindful of it and, be prepared to cut around it.
"最初のシーンが始まったらちょっとなんかクラクラっとするんじゃないかなっていうぐらい今ちょっと緊張してますけどね。
なんかハリウッド映画だけでね、もう自分でも舞い上がっちゃってね。
今までになく日本の文化やら精神性がきっちり描けた初めての作品になったんじゃないかと。
ロサンゼルスでキャスティングされたんですけど、たまたまそのラストサムライのページを見て、っていうかそのオーディションっていうキャスティングの募集してて、でそこでラストサムライってトム・クルーズ主演って書いてあって、で僕の役があって、でそれで友達に試したらどうって言われて。
ハリウッドでね、サウンドステージの19ステージっていうのはもう昔から3つ数えるであるとかね、ハンフリー・ボガートが主役をやったああいう映画を撮ったそのセットがステージなんですね。そこに今回の明治天皇のね御前会議のセットが組まれて、もうそれ見た時からハリウッドのワーナーのこういうバーバークのこういうスタジオで日本のこういうセットでやりたいなっていうね、もうその思いはすごく強いですよね。
外人の方がやるんでね、どんなになるかなと僕思ってたんですけど、どこだこすごいやっぱりさすがにね勉強しましたけど、トムさんなんかもうびっくりするぐらいうまくてね、めっちゃかっこいいでしょって、聞いたら8ヶ月ねなんか練習ね特訓したとやっぱりすごいなと思って、やっぱりそれだけもう現場にできたらもうちゃんとできるようにね、もう様になってちゃんとできてるんですよね。
It's this wonderful adventure set in real time in history, and very romantic, yet things that mean a great deal to me about integrity, loyalty, friendship, compassion. It was a very powerful screenplay.
トム・クルーズさん扮するオールグレンを許すっていう解釈で皆さん最終的に捉えてらっしゃるかもしれないんですけど、私は彼を人として人間として認めてるっていうところは、そこは共感できましたかね。
渡辺佳代さんです。
映画が持ってるような雰囲気っていうか、その関係を築いていくっていうのはもう全く同じようにオフキャメラでもオンキャメラでももう1年という間気づきましたんで、だからすごくそういう意味ではなんていうのかな、どこからどこまでがキャラクターでどこからどこまでがパーソナルかっていうのも本当にこう分からなくなるぐらいその関係を深めた感じがして、だから彼の顔を見るともうその途端にもうなんか目がうるうるしてくるみたいな、いつもそういう感じですね。
This movie wouldn't have been possible without the actors and their contribution to the film.
第一関門は日本の観客の方が見て納得のいくものというそれだけを意識して作ってたんで、まあ自分の出番のあるなしに関わらず毎日現場に行っていろいろチェックしてたんですけどね、そのうちやっぱりみんなも、違いをやってみせたり意味合いから全部説明するとその意見をちゃんと取り入れてくれるようになってきて、ですから結局もう仕上げギリギリまで立ち会ってもう本当になんかスタッフのような感じだったですね、後半は。
内尾役の真田広之さん、高役の小雪さん。
映画作りって作って終わってじゃなくて観客の方が見ていただいて初めて終わりだと思うので、なんかちょっとした充実感みたいなものが少し芽生えましたね。
この映画を通じてアメリカの人たちも全然侍のことをもっと分かってくれると思うし、
侍じゃなくても本当に人間としてやらなくちゃいけない礼儀とか挨拶とかそういう部分、本当にこの映画を見てみんな家帰ってもただいまとか言わない人が多い中で見て、やっぱりこういうのって大切なんだなって。
尊敬の念だとか信念とか相手を思いやう気持ちとか、
謙虚さと誠実さと、信じるものに対する忠義心と、やはりなんかそういったものっていうのはこれから特に必要になってくるような気がするんですよね。
ただそれはすごく気負ってなんかっていうんではなくて、すごく毎日毎日の積み重ねの中でそういうものを払拭したり積み重ねてたりすることができたので、実感としてはなんかあんまりそんな気負った感覚よりはすごくこう一つ一つそういうのをやれたかなって気はしてるんですけど。今日という日を迎えられるっていうことが本当に夢を超えた、もう成層圏の向こうまで一回飛んで帰ってきたような、そんな贅沢をさせてもらったような気がしています。
ぜひトムの目を通してもう一度日本の素晴らしさを味わっていただければ。
この日本の文化とか人を敬う気持ちとか、すごく人間として根本的なものが世界中の人に少しでも伝わっていけたら、私たちがこの作品に参加した甲斐があったんではないかと思います。日本人の方々も世界の中の方々も少しでもこの映画が何かのきっかけになれば私は嬉しいと思います。
I feel so fortunate to have met and worked with these great artists, and we've given a lot of our lives to it, and I'm very, very appreciative to be here tonight with them. We're all very excited, so thank you. Thank you very much. ありがとう。